What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Nintendo Land. We are officially in the month of May, which means more excitement leading up to Nintendo's big conference or whatever they're going to have this June since E3 is canceled. There's a lot of stuff to talk about with that, but of course I want to continue talking about Kirby and the Forgotten Land because there's still so much I want to talk about, so much I want to discuss for the future of the franchise and also the future of this game in general, because I still think we are going to get some DLC. In today's DLC talk, we're kind of moving away from copy abilities for a second and talking about characters that are already established in this game, and more details regarding that. So today I'm going to actually talk about how we could have DLC revolving around two different playable characters that we've actually had DLC like this, or really extra content like this in the past, and I would love to see this being added to Kirby and the Forgotten Land. And that content I'm going to talk about is a side Meta Knight or King Dedede game mode. Now, these modes are normally never canon. They're actually side stories of what could happen if Meta Knight actually took the mantle as the hero, or if King Dedede took the mantle and actually defeated the final boss. And these were kind of its own individualistic stories that really had nothing to do with the actual gameplay and the actual story of the main game. And today I'm going to give two different examples of how each of these would work for both Meta Knight and King Dedede, whether it's a canon game mode or whether it's a non-canon one. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. There's a lot of stuff to talk about this month as we get into the busy time before we hit the summer of games, before we get all these big reveals. So in order to make sure that you caught up with all of them, make sure you leave a like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to stay up to date on whenever I post. It helps out a lot, guys. Thank you so much. And without further ado, let's jump into what these game modes would actually play like. Now let's first start off with Meta Knight, and let's start off with the fact that this is probably going to be a non-canon game mode. All the Meta Nightmare modes are non-canon stories of what would happen if Meta Knight was actually the hero here and actually took it on himself to take out the final boss. Kirby's almost like he's not there, almost as if it's just Meta Knight, and that's kind of how the gameplay goes. It's the same levels and the same structure, it's just with Meta Knight this time around. Maybe there's some extra puzzles that only Meta Knight can do, but for the most part, it's mostly the same game just ran through with a different character with different abilities. So they could definitely do the same thing here within Kirby and the Forgotten Land. Maybe it just has Meta Knight actually being the hero this time around because we know he is sucked into the void, and maybe he just goes on his grand adventure starting with, obviously helping all the Waddle Dees like he actually does within the game, but this time he goes on the grand adventure all the way throughout the world of the Forgotten Lands in order to finally get to Lab Discovera and defeat the final bosses himself. Something else we also get is extra bosses, especially at the end of the game for Meta Knight. Often change the story a little bit depending on who you fight at the end based on your characters. So Meta Knight, for instance, in Planet Robobot had to fight recreations of Dark Matter and Queen Sectonia before he could even battle Galactonite, which once again, another weird change from the original story mode. But where Kirby and the Forgotten Land steps up, it kind of changes the status quo of having side modes that are pretty much different non-canon game modes. I feel like everything in Kirby and the Forgotten Land is canon, and I mean literally everything, because it all ties into the overall overarching story, and even the post-game has tie-ins to the story completely, and it's not really a side spin-off or anything like that. It's all real. It's all actually happening. So I would love to actually see a Meta Knight game mode that actually takes place right before Kirby actually came and met up with him. His figurine description states that the mysterious vortex brought Meta Knight to the New World too. He quickly tasked himself with finding a new way back to Popstar. Until the Beast Pack attacked Waddle Dee Town, the besieged settlement needed protecting, and a swordsman never ignored his chance to train. Based on some other in-game information, we know that Meta Knight landed in Winter Horns, so it would be a cool place to start his adventure, and maybe some of the levels are the same, but there's also new levels within Winter Horns, and plus that'd be really cool because Winter Horns is one of the most interesting levels to me. I love how it's this like old town that's kind of covered and blanketed in snow. I would love to see new levels based in this world, and Meta Knight pretty much backtracking, making his way all the way back to Waddle Dee Town, and that will be his kind of entire story. You can see him go from Winter Horns all the way to Wondaria's theme park, maybe even having new stages and new levels there, and pretty much just backtracking all the way back to the first world. It would be kind of like Kirby's adventure, but going backwards and also having new levels and new areas. Obviously, the first world is going to be very easy, so in Meta Knight's version, it would be very difficult and changed a little bit as the Beast Pack are attacking. This is kind of their big attack that Kirby missed out on, so maybe that could be part of Meta Knight having to fight off hordes of giant beasts and all types of creatures. That'd be really cool. And maybe there was another beast that they didn't even talk about, part of the Beast Council that Meta Knight defeated, that they added. I don't know, maybe it was some type of extra boss or something that they can throw in, but I think a side mode with Meta Knight kind of showing his, adventure in the beginning would have been really cool. Now it looks like our boy King Dedede had it a lot more rough than Meta Knight did. Thankfully Meta Knight's mind was strong enough to not be corrupted by Fecto Forgo, but King Dedede was not so lucky. Yeah, this dumb penguin actually got corrupted. But thanks to that, he turned into Wild Dedede, which, you know, eventually turned him into a main boss of the game, one of the main Beast Pack members, and Kirby actually had to fight him in 2 different versions. But before we start off about something that could be canon within his storyline, what if we went with something more non-canon? Once again, like King Dedede's tour from Kirby Triple Deluxe. It's pretty much like Meta Nightmare, where King Dedede runs through all these stages that Kirby already ran through, and pretty much does the same exact thing, just using obviously his new powers and his new abilities in order to do so. The same thing would work out fine in Kirby and the Forgotten Land, but you could probably say something that you could also say about Meta Knight. Well, there's already weapons in the game that kind of give Kirby the same abilities as Meta Knight with Meta Knight's sword, and obviously with Dedede's hammers. What's the point? Well, here's the thing. There's still a lot of moves that you cannot do with the hammer and with the sword in this game that you could do in 2D Kirby games. I would like to see a more fleshed out moveset, so having King Dedede himself and obviously having Meta Knight would give you those movesets. You know, we know Meta Knight can do things like dive, jump up in the air really high, and also do different types of swings with his hammer, and Meta Knight has all types of different abilities that maybe you can do, such as his little tornado spins and his drill spins and teleportation and all stuff like that, you know, and having those things with those actual characters would feel a lot better. So you could just run through the game once again with these side modes, and it'd give a reason to kind of replay the game again. But of course, I'm not here just to talk about us playing through the game again with just different characters. What if they actually added a more canon story to this, like I have already talked about with Meta Knight? We know King Dedede has his own story as well as he entered the island, and this story could potentially be one of the best challenges and one of the best stories that we've gotten from a side character so far. Under one of Dedede's figure descriptions, it states that King Dedede arrived in the new world shortly before Kirby and his friends. It looked like he could join forces with the Beast Pack, but that's no excuse for his mistreatment of the Waddle Dees. His iconic gown seems to have been altered to match his newfound allegiance, and he seems way stronger somehow. Obviously, we find out later on that Forgo messed with his brain and kind of controlled him into doing things that he didn't know he was doing. But I would love to see how this actually happened. I would love to see the whole story of maybe King Dedede arriving to the Forgotten Land, maybe wandering around, maybe even putting up a huge fight against a lot of these creatures until eventually getting his mind controlled. Maybe he got captured by Gormondo or some of the bosses and taken to the scientific room of Lab Discovera until his mind was wiped by, of course, Fecto Forgo. I would love to see kind of a side story like that, and also controlling him even with his mind controlled, and maybe seeing the, you know, different elements of him kind of coming back, but it's just still mind controlled Dedede at its core. I would love to see that, and I think a whole story kind of dedicated to that would be very interesting to see exactly what he went through as Kirby was eventually trying to get to him and eventually rescue him as well. Plus, it'd be super cool to play as the mass Dedede form of King Dedede, just crawling on all fours across the stage and stuff, and having new movesets, and obviously him also having his double hammer. I know Kirby can get that as well, but it would just be a lot of fun just seeing these different versions of King Dedede, and you get to keep leveling him up. Instead of, you know, obviously leveling up copy abilities, you can level up these characters by leveling up Meta Knight a little bit, and even King Dedede himself, and kind of introducing that wild form again. That'd be a lot of fun. And also maybe allow us to play the post game a little bit with King Dedede. That would be pretty cool, because we don't even know what happened to him. We just know he made it out somehow. We know he saved his Waddle Dee friends, but that was really about it. We seen the Beast Pack rush him, and then apparently he beat them, but maybe we get to even play through like a little horde mode of different Beast Pack animals attacking him, and maybe even try to find a way to escape this facility. That'd be really cool as well. So maybe all of King Dedede's missions are more missions that you can select from a mission screen, and you go through different versions and different parts of what he's went through, different flashbacks, instead of actually playing through a full-fledged story. And to play as these characters, we may not even need a whole story kind of element added. What if it was just an extra, you know, arena or Coliseum mode? We only have 3 right now. What if they added another one like Meta Knight's Coliseum or King Dedede's Coliseum, which allowed us to play with the characters a little bit more? That would be pretty cool. And also considering the fact, what if they added like a little thing, because there is a description saying from Meta Knight that he fought Gormondo 30 times and won. What if there was just a Gormondo Cup where each time you fight him gets a little harder? Maybe it's not actually 30 times, but it's like 10 times, and he gets different forms, and maybe he just keeps updating himself each fight. Maybe one fight he actually gets like gear, like a helmet and like giant arm pads or something, and maybe he gets a club one fight, and it just kind of adds new, you know, versions of Gormondo that Meta Knight has to fight through each time, and it kind of shows that, you know, friendly banter that they had in the post game. I would love to see that as well. Of course, like always, I leave it up to you guys. What would you guys like to see from a Meta Knight or King Dedede side mode? Would you want to see a side mode with maybe another character as well that's in the game? Maybe even playing as the the final boss, yes, Fecto Elphalus, that would be pretty cool, or maybe even playing as Elflin in some type of way. Let me know in the comments down below, and any other ideas that you have with these characters. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure you leave a like and subscribe to stay up to date on all things Kirby and the Forgotten Land, and Nintendo in general. And like always, I'll see you all on the next one. See ya, guys.